So hello everyone and welcome to this online policy dialogue organized by the European Policy Center in the framework of the Election Monitor, an EPC flagship initiative to monitor national elections across Europe and analyze their results as well as their implications for the EU. I am Berta López, I'm a junior policy analyst at the European Policy Center, and today we will zoom in into the recent Spanish general elections that took place yesterday. The elections were initially scheduled for December this year, but the Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez moved them forward after the poor performance of his Socialist Party in the recent regional and local elections that took place in May. Partido Popular won the elections with 33% of the votes and got 136 seats at the parliament. This result is, however, way below what most polls were predicting. The Socialist Party follows with 31.7% of the support and 122 seats, two more than the ones they have now. On the third position, despite losing 19 seats, we have the far-right Vox that has managed to keep this third position, two more than the left-wing coalition led by Yolanda Díaz, Sumar, with 31 seats. So with these numbers, none of the two main blocs, neither the right wing nor the left wing, has managed to secure the necessary majority of 176 seats, which is needed to form a government. And these results open a really uncertain scenario with many open options, so to say, ahead. Furthermore, these elections have taken place in the midst of the Spanish presidency of the Council of the EU. Only 3 weeks later, Spain took it over from Sweden on July 1st. There were really high expectations on this Spanish presidency, given the fact that it's the so-called golden one, like meaning that it's the last fully operative presidency before the end of the term, with the European elections scheduled for June next year. In this context, and to help us understand the meaning of these results for national politics and their significance at the EU level, we have today with us Nacho Alarcón, who is the Brussels correspondent of the Spanish newspaper El Confidencial. And he also has a weekly newsletter called Next to Europa, where he delves into specific EU affairs topics. Then we have Javier Carbonell, who is a PhD candidate at the University of Edinburgh, and he also teaches at Sciences Po in Paris. We are also waiting for Camino Mortera, who is the head of the Brussels office of the think tank Center for European Reform. But okay, we have now Camino with us. Hello,
Hi,
Camino.
I'm really sorry. I'm in
No
Spain,
worries.
and I knew this was happening at lunchtime, so I thought, of course, it's going to happen at 3 p.m. And somebody just alerted me lunchtime in Europe is 12. So sorry for that.
I was just introducing the panel, the discussion. I just introduced you.
That's
so you are right in time. So welcome to the three of you. Thank you so much for agreeing to participate in this panel discussion. So for our audience, we are gonna start by having an exchange with the panelists, and then I will open the floor for questions from the audience. You can ask your questions at any point during the panel through the Q&A box that you can see in your screen, or alternatively, if you prefer, you can also raise your digital hand that you can also see in your screen. And then I will, in this case, I would give you the floor when the time comes at the end of the discussion. So with that, I would like to start by asking the three of you, what is your reading about of the results? What do these results mean? And what are the factors explaining these results? And I would like to start with you, Camino. Were these results expected? How do you read these results?
Good. That's great that I start, because if you follow me on Twitter, which you should do, you might have seen that I was tweeting until 4 a.m. in the morning while writing a piece that I hope will get out tomorrow. So I'm just waking up with a coffee. So I am going to try to be coherent here. I was expecting these results. That said, I also have to test myself in the way that I was expecting that a hung parliament could happen, but I was expecting it to be rather because PP, so the Conservative Party, PP, and far-right Vox did not have enough votes to actually form a majority. What I was not expecting was this incredible rise of the Socialist Party. My particular view has always been sort of the same throughout the campaign. I think that we make a mistake when we think of Vox as a traditional European far-right party. I think in Spain, the most important issue for many people is the question of identity. And this has nothing to do with gender identity or migrant identity or, others' identity. It has to do with our own national identity. So a lot of what is happening today can be traced back to sort of the scars that the Catalonian independence process left. And that's why I always thought the story was not about Vox coming back, was not about Franco coming back. I think Spanish society is much more sort of tolerant than that. The big question and the interesting story is the collapse of the center and why both PP and PSOE have radicalized in a way and have moved away from the center, and the lack of allies for them to actually form a government. So as I understood that, and as I was witnessing the campaign, and maybe we can talk afterwards about the mistakes that some of them did, I was realizing that sort of the most likely scenario was always going to be a situation where nobody was going to have another majority, and that's where we are. So if I was a man, I would be in a touring speaking tour somewhere in the US earning $1 million per speech. I'm joking with that, but so that's my analysis. Sorry.
And what about you, Javier and Nacho? Were you expecting these results? Do you think that these results were predictable? What is your reading?
Okay, I can go. Yeah, I mean, to point out, I wasn't expecting the results in different little issues, but the general idea was that it was 50-50. It was 50-50 possibilities that the majority of the right and the far right, and the 50-50 possibility that they didn't arrive. And just if they don't get one or two votes or MPs enough, then they won't be able to form a government. And this is an important change with the way that the Spanish elections used to work up until now, where the party that generally won the elections was supported by a minority independentist party and was able then to govern. And this is not the case anymore because of the Catalan crisis. In this regard, I agree with Camino that this Catalan crisis is very, very important to explain Spain and explain these elections. Was polarize the positions, making that all the pro-independence parties are not going to be allied with the right and the far right. And I think my general reading of these elections is that this has been the success of saliency over position. And what do I mean by this? I mean that the Socialist Party has taken positions that are probably not in agreement with a lot of Spaniards. The clearest example is Catalonia, with the pardons to political leaders, pro-independence political leaders, the changing of the laws in order to ease the dialogue table with the Catalan pro-independence leaders, and this is definitely a position that many voters are angry about. However, the point here is that this has not been a salient issue over the course of the campaign. Actually, the most topic that we have discussed on nationalism is actually Bildu, is actually the Basque country, but not Catalonia. So this has made this issue less important. So despite a lot of voters having contrary positions to what Pedro Sánchez was doing, or the position of the government was doing, they care less about this. This was not the main issue or the main concern when they went to decide to vote. I think we can say something similar with regards to migration and Morocco. So again, the position regarding Morocco is also an issue that is probably not in agreement with a lot of Spaniards, but it has remained and kept relatively low saliency to the migration issue, which is crucial for the right to emerge. So I think this issue of the issues that were criticized about this government that were not salient, and they were able not to make it salient, has been crucial for the kind of relative victory of the left, or the plural kind of Spain, the pro-left of Spain, if you could call it in that regard. And just to mention a little one thing else, the rest of the economic policies are in general quite in agreement with the rest of Spain. So we have, in general, a good economic outcome with low inflation, relatively good economic growth, less precarity, labor reform. So in this regard, I think that the government was suited to have the result that it ended having. That's it. Thank you.
From my part, well, I totally agree with Camino and Javier in most of their points. For me, this election has come only to a very simple choice. It was to elect the least bad option. I mean, I think that for many voters, this was an election not about it was only about electing the least bad option between a far-right government or a left-wing government with the support of many forces that, as Camino and Javier said, are well challenging for many Spaniards. So what we have seen, I think, is a big mobilization in the face of a possible right-wing government. We have seen also a really bad campaign by Mr. Feijóo and their team. It's very difficult to explain how bad the campaign of Feijóo has been. I mean, really, it has been a disaster. And also, well, I think that from my point as the only journalist here, we also had to say that well, the polls that we published were clearly wrong. That we are lived in an echo chamber for a long time, and that this explains why it has been such a surprise to many people, these results. I mean, we need to do a self-criticism as part of the media, and also just to go back to the campaign. It has been, for example, very simple things like the Mr. Feijóo's relationship with a Galician drug dealer. The Partido Popular was not even capable of replying to that issue that was clearly that was going to come into the campaign, and they were not even capable of replying to that issue. So I think that the campaign has changed a lot in the last 3 weeks. So in some points we thought like this is going to be a clear victory of the right, especially after the face-to-face debate between Mr. Sánchez and Mr. Feijóo. And then this last week has been a disaster for Partido Popular. They are just they need to be grateful that the campaign has ended this week. If the campaign has gone another week more, well, we don't know what the rest could have been. So that's my how I read the results.
Yeah, I agree with you that probably like this last week of the campaign or like the last 2 weeks have probably like changed the path of the or like the outcome of the elections quite a lot. So as I was mentioning in my introduction, so neither the right-wing coalition nor the left-wing coalition has managed to secure a majority. We have PP and Vox that have 169 seats, 7 short of from the like absolute majority, and the left wing with 153 seats. Which are the open scenarios now? What is possible? What alliances are we likely to see in the coming weeks? I don't know who wants to go first. Javier, yeah.
I can go. So I think what these elections have resulted is that the right-wing possibility has been completely discarded. I think it would be. I mean, it's not impossible because nothing is impossible in Spanish politics, but I think that is the most unlikely option, and that is the option that has resulted in a failure. So the Popular Party led by Feijóo is going to try to form a government, but it's most likely going to fail in the attempt. So there's basically 2 big options. One is that the pro-independence parties say yes and support the left-wing government coalition that has been running up until now. So basically, things as usual as in 2019. The same scenario is repeated, but in this case, as difference with the last one, they just had to abstain. They just had to not vote against this government in order for it to be successful. And in this case, we need both the votes of the left-wing pro-independence party and the right-wing pro-independence party of Catalonia. I'm optimistic about this. I do think that any party that is seen as repeating elections and giving another chance to the right, particularly in Catalonia, particularly our right, especially Vox, which is explicitly and very contrary to Catalonia's interests and pro-independence interests. So, like, one of their main policies is to illegalize these pro-independence parties. So I think that would be very costly. I think Pedro Sánchez has all the incentive to support and accept basically anything that they ask for, any agreement that they ask for, short of the referendum, which doesn't seem that they're going to ask that, because yesterday it wasn't mentioned. So this might, so in that regard, so far, I'm optimistic that there's probably going to be an agreement. However, this might not happen. Spanish politics has given us plenty of examples where there was an election, a repetition of an election that wasn't supposed to happen, or there was no real reason for it. And this is really the other likely scenario, is that there's no support from the pro-independence parties, and then Pedro Sánchez risks again another election in order to gain more support for his party, end up killing, Sumar to his left, and attempts to reach government. But this is a very, very risky option, and it doesn't seem that the elections have been that good for him to make this gamble.
Do you, Nacho and Camino, agree with that? Do you think that Junts per Catalunya, Puigdemont party, will agree to abstain? Because that's, as you were mentioning, that's the difference. Like in 2019, Junts was like, the sum was working with Junts saying no to the investiture session. Now, Sánchez would need the yes from Esquerra Republicana and Bildu and the abstention from Junts. Do you also, Nacho and Camino, think that this is a likely a possible option, or would you rather think that the possibility of election repetition has to be considered?
I think that we should consider the possibility of, as Javier said, is an option. It's also true that Sánchez, I think that he's gonna explore any possibility to win the support of all these parties. I think that for him is the more reasonable scenario. Problem is not from his part, but from the part of the other party. So it's on Junts field to decide whether they are going to support this or not. And also you need to understand that we are playing in different fields, because we also have to look into the internal politics of Catalonia and into the internal politics of Euskadi to understand how these parties interacts with the state, with the central government. So there you have two big political gamblers. So Sánchez is a political gambler. He clearly risk and win. So he may think that another election could work. And the other political gambler is Puigdemont. So you have two big political gamblers, and well, there's a possibility that one of them play hard. So it's the more reasonable from the socialist position. The more reasonable scenario is to go for a government with these parties and to keep, as Javier said, everything short of a referendum. But there is a big but. There is the Sánchez is a very, he like risk, and he think that is part of his strategy. So I think that the another elections are a possibility. I would say that I see the new elections a little bit more as an scenario, probable scenario than Javier. I think that there is a little bit more of that possibility, but I also agree that the most reasonable scenario for him is to go for a government with this majority.
Can I chip in? Hello?
Sure. Go ahead.
Yes. So I am going to do the betting thing, which my UK colleagues love so much. And I'm going to be even more contrarian to what it was before. I'd say a new election has at least 50% of chances of happening. And I say this not only because I've been saying this for 3 weeks, so that would be a perfect indication for my analysis. And once again, I could go on a speaking tour, but also because when we consider the alliances that Sánchez can do, and Sánchez is indeed a huge political gambler and one that is proven to be quite strengths, as we're saying. We have to understand, especially when one doesn't come from Spain, that the parties that hold the keys to parliaments, the kingmakers, from the Basque Country and from Catalonia, are far from being an homogeneous bloc. And they're actually fighting elections of their own. So one thing that also we often forget to mention is that we did have regional elections on the 28th of May that led us to this strange middle of the summer election, but we didn't have those in the Basque Country and Catalonia because they hold elections, in different dates. They have their own elections coming up, and these are blocs. These are parties that are actually fighting one another. So if you think about the Republican left in Catalonia with Oriol Junqueras, who basically was just in jail, and if we think about how they are fighting for the sort of pro-independent votes in Catalonia, and by the way, basically losing very badly to PSOE last night, which I think is the huge story of these elections, how PSOE has managed to wipe nationalists from some, even from some villages altogether. If we look at that, and if we also look at the way that Bildu is basically a radical left ETA, nostalgic or even continuator party, and the dynamics that HL Bildu has with PNV, which are the traditional right-wing nationalists in the Basque Country, that is also very interesting. So last time around, everything hinged on 5 MPs of the PNV, of the PNV, the traditional rights party in the Basque Country. And this time around, and I was listening to all the presses yesterday, and by the way, please, if you're Spanish, do this exercise once, and I try to explain Spain to a non-Spaniard, because whenever somebody was appearing on TV, I was trying to explain, okay, this person was just in jail. This person is going to jail. Well, this person is supposed to go to jail, but can't go to jail because it's in another country. So these are also very strange and very dangerous bedfellows for Pedro Sánchez. There is a price to be paid for that electorally for him as well. And they are going to play hardball. So I will not be that sure. And if you listen to them, as I was doing yesterday, none of them said we're going to support Sánchez. Of course, they will all change their minds. There will be a price for that. And my particular interest would be on how does the dynamics in between these parties facing elections themselves play out when they're also trying to negotiate supporting a government of Pedro Sánchez.
Yeah, I do agree with you that this, like the internal dynamics between Esquerra and Junts and Bildu and PNV will play like a huge role. I would love to continue talking about like possible scenarios, but I see that it's almost like half an hour past, so I would like to move on to the next block, which is the impact of or the implications of the results of the elections at the EU level. I will start by picking up a question from Bernd Rieger from Deutsche Welle that is asking if the formation of a coalition government will take months or ends into a return of the elections, will that influence the EU presidency, or will the caretaker government just go on with its program? So I would like to ask with this question, like what will happen at the presidency level? Will Spain be able to seize the political dimension of the presidency? And I would give the floor to Nacho.
Okay, so just a little cinematographic, a reference to the cinematographic quality of the Spanish politics to end up all the previous question. you need to understand to our foreigners here in the chat that right now the government depends on Sánchez has lost the majority in the Senate. He's the second party in the parliament, and he's depending on a guy who fled from a Spanish justice in the trunk of a car. So you need to have a patience with the Spanish politics, because it's complicated. Then on the presidency, I think I'm going to be very. I'm only going to say that now we have good and bad news. So good news is that there will be no changes in the teams, on the priorities, or even in the ministries, because even if we had a clear majority for the left-wing coalition, if there was going to have if we have a new government, there will be changes in the ministries. In this scenario, there are even no changes in the ministries. So you have a clear leadership, let's say, in the ministries, and you have the same teams, the same priorities. So that's good news. Bad news is obviously that you are not focused. I mean, you are thinking about the majority in the parliament. You are fearing for your job as a minister. I don't know. You have a lot of reasons, a bunch of reasons to not be focused on, I don't know, the reform of the fiscal rules, the migration. I don't know. You have a lot of reasons. So you have this good news is the continuity, no changes. Everything goes on more or less as business as usual. Also, even with the good news that some people from the technical groups, they were like, if we don't have a government, we will be perfectly fine. We don't have a minister here pressing us. So even they for them, it's not a bad news. But obviously, you lost the political leadership that you could have with a proper government and with ministers that are focused. So I think that this is the key, is that you have good and bad news in that regard.
Camino, do you want to comment on that as well?
Yeah, I agree 100% with Nacho, as I always do. I think the good news indeed is that personal changes will not happen. The bad news is that Spain will be distracted. To me, this was always more about what role does Spain want to play in the European Union than about the presidency itself. Because I'm one of these few people who keep on insisting that the presidency is not that important. It's like, okay, it's fine. You're there, you're like chairing meetings. You have your priorities and you can showcase your country, which is very, very important in terms of the way that we communicate Europe to the citizens and the other way around. So that's very fine. But unless a presidency is very, very good, like the French or the Germans, because they put the resources and they put the sort of the enthusiasm, whatever, or very, very bad, like the Czechs 10 years ago, that they're still talking about that. By the way, the Czechs did a great job this time around. It doesn't really have an impact on many things. It cannot. I mean, it can set the agenda if you want, but the agenda is set like so many months in advance that, given how we are living in this world of like non-stop crisis, perma crisis, as you guys say in the EPC, we are going to see, we're not going to see many changes in the policy agenda part of things. Of course, the Spanish presidency coincided with a very legislative heavy moment of the European Union, where lots of those years will need to be concluded, and the European and the presidency was supposed to be boosting them. I think I heard, I don't know, everything from between 100 and 120 those years for this presidency. Now, again, the priorities of the presidency themselves, I don't think are necessarily revolutionary or something that is going to make the European Union, like take a leap of any sort, especially the first one, which is reindustrialization, which is a big fighting grounds in member states at the moment. So it's not going to be something that it's going to achieve any meaningful, in my view, results. But the problem that I have with this presidency and the elections right now, and it's not a problem that I had before, because I thought, okay, if the hang parliament happens, if the blocking happens, then it will still be much more related to the fact that the Conservatives cannot form a government, so we will find a way out of that. Now, what I'm seeing is that the negotiations are going to be long. They're going to pass through Belgium, possibly through Waterloo, which is also an interesting fact to take into account, and it's going to make Nacho and other Brussels correspondents very happy because they don't have enough work, for now. But especially because Spain will be distracted during a time where discussions on the European Union are going to be very, very important for what's coming next. And I'm not talking about the presidency, I'm talking about what are we going to do about China, the migration pact, which, by the way, the Spanish presidency, yes, is supposed to be doing something about, but it's not going to do anything about. Fiscal rules reform, another thing that is going to fall on the table, but it's going to go beyond the presidency. Energy, climate, with the Commission also sort of disintegrating slowly. There is going to be a lot of things that, in my view, are going to redefine Europe's position in the world in the years to come. And Spain was absent by choice for many years, then came back briefly, then was absent sort of by obligation because of all the internal mess that the coalition had. And now it's going to be absent again. And that is what I think it's a pity. And that is the one gamble I think Pedro Sánchez has lost with these elections.
And go ahead. Sorry, Javier.
No, sorry. I was just going to say that I have nothing to add. I completely agree with Nacho and Camino on the point on continuity, and the point that even regardless of we have repetition of elections or a government, I think the negotiations are going to take for long, and that is definitely going to affect our position to kind of lead the European Union and put our position there. And I agree with both of them. Not much to add.
Good. And also, so these elections have taken place less than 1 year before the European elections next year. We are going to see a redistribution of the top jobs. We are going to see new or different probably majorities at the European Parliament. What do you think that the results in Spain tell us about the likely outcome of the June 2024 elections at the European Parliament? Whoever wants to go ahead.
Can I start? Sorry. So in the same way that the Spanish election is not a message to Weber or doesn't mean that Franco is back or not back or whatever, I think there will be little extrapolation from these elections to what happens in the European Parliament elections next year, both in Spain and beyond, because we know pretty well that people vote in the European elections in a different way that they vote in national elections. It's mostly a midterm vote, and it often goes against governments, sitting governments, for obvious reasons. Unfortunately, these elections, the European elections, have little to do with Europe and a lot to do with what citizens perceive their governments to be doing. There's a lot of, if I may call it that, random voting. I'm guilty of that when I was younger. We're living in a different country. You see a party that sounds funky and you don't know what the European Parliament does anyway. So you vote for them, and that results normally in very interesting parties being represented in the European Parliament. Now, the European Parliament, in my view, is going on a trajectory that is not going to be reversed anytime soon. So it's going to be even more fragmented than it was last time. The EPP will still have a majority, but will probably have less of a majority than it used to. And the EPP itself is moving to some hard rights positions on things like climate and similar things, and also trying to stop the overpowerful European Commission from doing things, since the European Commission under von der Leyen has been doing things on its own for sort of 3 years or 4 years non-stop. So I think that the direct extrapolation is difficult to see. What I think is that it will probably affect our participation in this horse trading top job circus that happens around July every 5 years. Lots of us assumed back in the day that Sánchez was going to be out, so of course Sánchez was going to be in Brussels. I'm unsure whether this is going to be the fact anymore. And I am also unsure of whether the next government to come out of this election or a repeat election will have the necessary strength and the necessary ambition to actually play the role that Spain is supposed to be playing in Europe and sort of demand things as opposed to being grateful for things being given to us. So I'm afraid that we're probably heading for a repetition of some disastrous personal choices that we made some years ago. So I'm not very optimistic on that, unfortunately.
I would like to ask you, Nacho, like, what do you think about that? And also, like, I saw, if I'm not wrong, that you were writing the other day about the fact that Spanish politicians are using Brussels for, like, to legitimize their positions. Like Nadia Calviño mentioned in an interview that all the ECFIN committee was supporting her. We also had some other people making this kind of statement. So like, I would like to ask you, like, what do you think the Spanish elections mean for the European elections, but also why do you think that Spanish politicians use Brussels as a presentation card, and whether this is because, as Camino was saying, Spain still has this sense of not being enough, or like inferiority feeling?
Yeah, it's clearly part of an inferiority complex of Spain towards the rest of Europe. We think that we are only invited in Europe, and that someday they will kick us out of the party. So we usually have this inferiority complex. Also, there's the point that for the parties in Spain, where we have had a lot of polarization, we have had 4 years of a lot of noise, to have the source of good image of legitimation that is Europe is important. So Europe is very respected in Spain for a lot of citizens of all the political forces, or almost all the political forces. So to use the European card is very important in elections. So you can say, like, well, this is a neutral outside player that is saying that I'm the good guy, so you have to vote for me. One diplomat once told us, a group of journalists, that Brussels was going to, in that moment a few years ago, that Brussels was going to be the Supreme Court of the national politics of Spain. We were going to bring all of our stuff to Brussels, so that the Commission decide who wins, and that is also reflected on how political parties they try to sell this image that they are the lads that the Commission wants in the government. So this is a part of that reasoning, but it's mainly about all can be explained by the inferiority complex of Spain. Then I also agree with Camino on that it's not very useful to compare or to know what's going to happen in the European elections coming from our national elections, because each country votes differently. What I think is interesting is on the also on the top jobs discussion, and the I think that 2019 made clear that the masters of this game are in the council, are not in the parliament. So the parliament decided itself to play a minor role by electing von der Leyen, even if von der Leyen was not on the cards. So now everything is in the council. So for me, it's more important how many seats each political family has in the council than the parliament. The parliament is important for the 5 years of legislature, but it's not when it comes to the top jobs. And I think that today is a bad day for the EPP, because they have lost their last opportunity to have one of the 4 big guys. You have now only Poland to win. It's not an easy game, that. It's a very bad day for EPP in that sense. I do not think that we can say now how this translates into the European elections. What we can see also is that the bigger players in the EPP, they feel that it's more acceptable to agree with parties from ECR, from the Conservatives. So Vox is of the ECR, Fratelli d'Italia is of ECR. We saw Feijóo, and this is a position of the Popular Party of Spain, saying that well, maybe we have to look to other parties in Europe. This is a position, a long-standing position of the Popular Party of Spain in Europe. So we may see this trend after the elections. But I think that a lot of things have to change to see other things other than the same majority than now. I think that we will have changes, but we will have the same, more or less the same equilibrium.
Yeah, I agree with you that probably it's not a happy day for the EPP. And as you mentioned, the ECR, you mentioned Meloni, you mentioned Hungary and Poland. And with that, I would like to jump into the topic of the far right, because it was it's like especially in international newspaper during this past week, you could see that the international community was really like concerned, or at least attentive to the role that the far right would have in Spain. It seems that they haven't lived up to the expectations that were put on them. They haven't had, they have lost 19 seats, and especially if you compare it to their really good results in the regional and local elections in May, where they doubled their results. They haven't lived up to the expectations. So to comment on that, I would like to give the floor to Javier. If you can give us a little bit like an analysis of like where's why Vox has gotten these results, and what is Vox roles at the Spanish political landscape right now?
Okay, so I mean, very big question. I'm gonna try to say a couple of really short things. First, the far right in Spain is a bit different than the far right in the rest of Europe. I mean, everyone has a specificity and a specific flavor of their own far right. But in terms of Spain, is a secession from the Popular Party, and it really reproduces a lot of the rhetoric and a lot of the positions of the Popular Party, just got into the extreme. So one of the big differences or the big particularities of the Spanish far right is that it's very economically liberal. So it's really about downgrading taxes and it's really targeting generally which the rich segments of the population. Regardless, they have tried to target poor, other segments, but it doesn't really have the base that, for example, Marine Le Pen has with manual workers in France. So in that regards, if we could compare it, I mean, now that I'm in France, I would say is a bit more similar to Zemmour than to Le Pen. Obviously, there's many differences, but that would be the idea. Also, Vox rhetoric is quite aggressive in that sense. So it hasn't really followed a process of de-diabolization, normalization, or mainstreamization of the discourse. They're very, very aggressive and very open about it. And I think is one of the big mistakes of the campaign was precisely not to downgrade their aggressivity, which has mobilized a lot of the left against Vox. But I think we have to bear in mind something which is that we're repeating this. In the first elections of 2019, we had two elections. They also didn't get the expectations that they reached the expectations that they created. It was because there was a repetition of the elections, and of course, in that moment, people were angrier with the political system, but they got such a good result, and they haven't gotten it that much since then. So they have been stabilized around the number that they're at the moment. So I think in that regard, I think that the particularity of Spain is that while in many countries there's two axes that cross each other, like the economic axis and the cultural axis, that you can find culturally right-wing and economically left-wing parties or people. This is not so much the case in Spain. In Spain, these two axes are very, very, very similar. So your position, if you're right-wing in cultural elements, you're probably right-wing also in economic elements, which this makes it very difficult for these kind of parties to break the political system and attract a different type of voters. So they're just offering the same as the Popular Party, but just more extreme. And more or less the same happens with Sumar and PSOE. So I think that is what explains that they don't have such good results. And basically the difference, I think, between the results in the regional elections and these elections is the left. Really, the story is on the left, in the sense that the left has been mobilized and has been unified to the left of the Socialist Party, more than to the right. Although there's many things, but I'm gonna cut it here, and then we can discuss it more later.
Okay, can I say something very, very short on the Vox?
Go ahead.
I think that it's very important not to underestimate Vox. I think that Vox is still a very, very solid player. And also it's interesting because Vox grows in an environment of great frustration with regard to Catalonia and in opposition to the figure of Sánchez. And those two elements are still on the table. And now Catalonia will also be even more important factor for the government. So the two reasons that made Vox to grow, or two of the biggest issues that made Vox increase in votes, are still there. So I think that they have lost many votes, but as Javier said, I think it's more a mobilization by the left than demobilization by the right, or a change of course by the voters of Vox. So maybe in the future, if the left is not so mobilized, and these two factors are still on the table, we'll see also a new increase on Vox. So I will say that it's important not to underestimate Vox, because they're still a big player. I think that Spain sent a very important and clear message yesterday, that the voters don't want a far-right government, but the Vox is still there, and there are still possibilities for them to come back.
Thank you. And I would like to ask you, Camino, especially for the international audience or EU audience, what are the similarities of Vox with other far-right European parties? What can it be compared to Javier was mentioning to Zemmour? Which kind of far-right can be Vox compared to?
I am very unpopular when I say these kind of things, because people accuse me of being a far-right denier or something like that. I do think, and I agree with Javier on that Vox is more different to other European far-right parties than it is similar. And it's basically because of what Nacho just said, because the way Vox grew off the Partido Popular, and as a reaction to the Catalonian independence movement, and on this I really want to underline that this is not about Catalonia wanting to be independent or want to have more powers, because we have been dealing with this since the transition in 75 to 78, or the Basque Country, trying to get more powers. I'm talking about the specificities of El Procés, the specificities of the unilateral declaration of independence, and all this sort of jail time and people running on trunks of cars that came afterwards. I think that left a number of scars, I was saying before, in Spanish society, that were also taken by parts of the media, which are based in Madrid, and recycled into some very appealing form of Madrid nationalism. And I always say that if you want to understand Spain, you have to look at things like not only Puigdemont, but also Rosalía, and artists that have now been sort of reivindicating the old time Spanish flamenco dancing and all these kind of things, which were for a long time identified with being from the right and with Franco indeed. Now we have this different brand of nationalism in a way, which is Madrid is a great city. Why is everybody blaming Madrid for the problems? We like living here, and we're going to make this the greatest region in Spain. And that's where Ayuso comes from as well. And I think when Nacho says do not underestimate Vox, I would also say actually the most important boost for Vox policies and ideas was not Vox performance yesterday, but was the fact that yesterday when Feijóo, Pepe's leader, went to the balcony of his headquarters to give a speech, for some reason surrounded by lots of men in white shirts, which I didn't understand, because PR-wise that's a disaster. Then you had Madrid's President Díaz Ayuso appearing like a vision in a red silk blouse, and the house went down. And people started saying, chanting Ayuso, Ayuso, Feijóo could not speak. To me, that was the political death of Feijóo. And this is what the PP is probably going to look like moving forward. More Ayuso l'espejo, more radicalism, more Madrid nationalism, more fighting what they perceive to be regional exceptionalism from the center, by the center. And in that respect, I think that lots of the things that Vox was there to do, which was supposed to be, unanimity, sorry, I do a lot of QMV versus unanimity policy work. Unity of Spain, the king, the rule of law in the way that is understood by some people, law and order and all these kind of things. These messages got lost, in my view, because there is a very hardcore faction of Vox that ran for some reason untamed during the campaign, talking about stuff that very few people in Spain would support, like, curtailing rights for LGBTQI plus collective, or women rights, or things like that, migrants, migration. I work on migration. It's very interesting case study, Spain. We've got a lot of migrants. There is very little backlash when it comes to migration in general. So you could not take Vox and sort of like transplant it anywhere else. In the same that you could not take possibly Fratelli Italia and put it in Spain because of the regional elements. And because they lost the chance of like highlighting these regional elements and decided to go with this message of, going back 40 years or whatever it was, and Pepe wasn't able to stop them from using this message. I think they have lost badly, and it will be very difficult for Vox to recover the grounds that they gained over the past 7 years or so.
I think you mentioned something really interesting, which was the role that Ayuso was playing yesterday in the balcony. It was indeed curious, so to say, like all the men in white and hair in red, and probably the future of the Popular Party in Spain. It's pretty uncertain as well. I would love to continue delving into these topics, but we are 5 minutes. So in 5 minutes, it's 1 p.m. and I would like to give the floor to the audience. We have now, so if anyone wants to raise any question directly, they can use the digital hand. I will start by picking some of the questions that we that people have asked in the Q&A box. One of them is from David Frocci from, sorry if I'm not pronouncing this surname well, from Internet Society. He is asking, I'm looking at the calculator tool published by El Confidencial. I see there that there are enough votes if PP negotiates with PNV, with a yes from Unión del Pueblo de Navarra and Coalición Canaria. PNV is right-wing, as you rightly explained. Do you think this for sure costly scenario is possible? So do you think this is or is not possible?
I don't think it's possible. I think it's very, very unlikely. So super fast. The PNV is very, like, it's anti-fascist in its core. So there's an ideological element that is quite important here. Also, it's very important to understand that in Spain, the relationship between left-wing and right-wing and the national identity is very strong, in the sense that there's a lot of people who might hold like right-wing ideas, but because they have their main identity is Catalan, they consider themselves and self-identify as left-wing, and this happens a lot, and vice versa happens the same. So in that regard, the PNV is a bit weird party to classify as a right-wing party. It is, but at the same time, it has a lot of voters that classify themselves as left-wing. And also, and lastly, more importantly, the PNV traditionally has pacts with the Basque Socialist Party in the Basque Country, and so they exchange different positions there, which is something that obviously the Socialist Party is going to ask afterwards for the general government. So PNV could definitely agree with Pepe, but it needs Vox, and that's not something that they're going to be able to pass.
Thank you. We have another one from Jared Rex Seidler that is asking, what does all of this mean for Spain at the EU level, which we have already answered, but including the ongoing post-Brexit negotiations with the UK over Gibraltar? Do you think Gibraltar is playing any role here, will have any role in the negotiations, or like the results will have anything to do with that?
Can I answer that? Sorry.
Yeah, please.
Go ahead.
Nacho, you can.
No, I was going to say that you are the most suited to reply to that question.
No, it's just because I am sorry to tell you, but Brexit is not a thing anymore, and negotiations between the UK and the European Union on anything are going to be determined by what the European Union thinks about an issue, regardless of who is at the helm of the government anywhere. So if the European Union, if Spain decides to, for some reason that they haven't done before, to get really tough on Gibraltar, you can be sure that the European Union will rally behind them. But another interesting thing is to know that Gibraltar play absolutely no role in any campaign in Spain since, you know, I have been kids, and certainly not throughout the Brexit negotiations. So I do not expect this issue to come back or up in any significant manner in the coming months.
Did you want to add something, Nacho?
No, I was going to say the same thing. I signed that. I mean, it's not anyone gives. Even you need to understand. I think that for Gibraltar, you need to go to. I grew up in Algeciras. You need to take a flight, go to Gibraltar, then go to Algeciras, to La Línea de Concepción, and understand that the political choices that you could make from Madrid, they have no sense over the Campo de Gibraltar, the region around Gibraltar, and I think that they will, at the end, Spain will look at the best option for this region, and the best option for this region is the best option for Gibraltar to maintain its status quo. I think that's the point. I know, and this is not important for anyone in the political scenario in Spain. Maybe Vox is like something that they say, but it's not important at all.
Thank you so much. And I am sorry because we have a few more questions in the Q&A box, but it's already 1, meaning that we have to close the discussion here. Thank you so much, first to the 3 of you, Javier, Nacho, and Camino, for agreeing to participate and for your great input to help us understand a little bit like what do the results mean for Spain first and then for the EU. I think that like we are in a pretty like open scenario with different options on the table. We will see how this continue, how this unfolds. I would maybe close with the message to the Brussels audience that the results of the elections are not going to have a big impact on the presidency, that the presidency is going to function more or less smoothly, regardless of whether Spain will be able to seize the political dimension or not. So yes, thank you so much as well to the audience. At the EPC, we will continue to monitor national elections across Europe and analyze their EU dimension. So I invite you to stay tuned for future events, and I wish all of you a great afternoon and an even better summer break. Thank you so much. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.